So here we are. This is the first of 3, and I really need to thank the Olympic Peninsula and the Marine Resources Committee of Clallam. But these people, Ann Schaefer, Kathy Lear, Ken Campbell, and Laura Tracy are the the team. If any one of these folks were to not participate, we wouldn't be here tonight. So if they could stand up. I can't tell you how much coordination it takes to do something like this. Next. This is the first of 4 presentations. Tonight's the overview. Tomorrow is an identification workshop. There's 2 of them, one in Squim and one here at the landing. And Wednesday is down to the nitty-gritty. How do we really plan for this? And I'm here to say that it's not rocket science. If we're organized, this is not a problem. We just need to be organized. And the cavalry in the form of the federal government will not be there. It's just up to us to defend the Alamo. And we can do this fine. It's not a big deal. It's just we have to, and I'll show you the 5-point plan. It's really very simple. Next. There you go. No, you're going backward. You need to go the down arrow. Down arrow there. You got it? The next one. Next one. So tonight is the overview. And last December we were here, and there was one big black buoy, and Arnold brought it here. And that was the beginning of the genesis of where we're at. Since that time, there's been well over 400 buoys like that wash up from Northern California to Kodiak, Alaska. And we'll talk about that. Next. Here's Jim. I wasn't sure if he would actually stand up, so there he is. These are actually the toys that were in 1992. There was 29,000 spilled, and that was a peer-reviewed scientific article. You'd be surprised how many people, scientists, don't think flotsam is worthy of serious scientific study. But it turns out that the surface of the planet, of the ocean, is virtually unknown. Nobody really knows what's floating out there, including the tsunami debris. This is an unprecedented event. Yeah, there have been magnitude 9 earthquakes before, but never in recorded history have humans been available to actually observe it coming ashore. Native Americans tell me lots of stories, but this is the first time we can actually see it coming ashore. So the science involved is enormous. And the ramifications to beachcombers is also very enormous because it can literally cover your front beach. So what are you going to do with it? It's like having too much of a really good thing. And we'll get into that. Next. So I went over this. OSCURS is verified with historical flotsam. I could go through 100 cases and we'd be here for another 5 days. This model has been used so many times that we've really learned to trust it. It uses daily U.S. Navy weather data. That's just not an average. Those are nitty-gritty, every 12 hours, real weather data. It's hard to believe that that kind of data exists. It exists every 90 kilometers over the whole world. And we've had this published probably in at least 20 scientifically peer-reviewed studies. Next. Here's an example of the hockey gloves. And I show this one because it mimics the tsunami debris. In 1994, you may not recall that there was 34,000 hockey gloves lost in 2 shipping containers. I was fortunate enough to track down the gentleman who ordered the hockey gloves, and he sent me the invoice. And I knew the latitude, longitude, where they were lost, and exactly how many. And that was right here. And National Geographic published this wonderful simulation. And these are places where the hockey gloves were found. From southeast Alaska, from the Aleutians, Cook Inlet, southeast Alaska, British Columbia, all the way down to Northern California. And you say, well, so what? That happens to be the area that's covered by the tsunami debris. We already have, I think, 500 buoys in my files. I have verified personally with photographs that have the same coverage. So we're not dealing with a unique pattern of arrival on the shore. We're dealing with something that's been known for a long, long time. What's new about it is, instead of 34,000 hockey gloves in 2 containers, we're dealing with billions of pieces, billions of hockey gloves from 400 miles of Japanese coastline. So it's a matter of just enormous volume for which we really don't know the answer to. Next, Jim. Here's the 2 slides. Here's the epicenter of the tsunami. Here is the Japanese coastline that was affected. That happens to be about 400 miles. It's about the same distance as Oregon and Washington put together, from Cape Flattery down to Northern California border. That's how much. Now imagine all the cities shredded and all that debris put on the ocean. That's what we're dealing with. And so you would never really know it precisely, but you would know that it's a lot of material. And then people would say, well, what's in it? Well, we don't know precisely, but I'll show you a few things. It would be as if one of you had your house shredded, and you say, well, what's going to float out of that? Well, there's going to be a lot of things. It could be mementos in plastic frames that have your family picture. It could be your favorite bowling ball. Bowling balls float. It could be your son's favorite soccer ball. It could be your favorite motorcycle. It turns out those go across the ocean too, and I'll show you that. You know, it's hard to forecast, and what I want to show you tonight is a few of the things that have happened in the last 6 months. But the bottom line is that the main mass will probably start arriving this coming October. So for whatever we do, we really have to be geared up to deal with the main mass arriving this October. Because this isn't going to wait for us. It isn't going to wait for some Senate subcommittee on the oceans. And by the way, I've shared most of this with Senator Cantwell and her subcommittee. It's not going to wait. Not going to wait for the bureaucrats to actually figure out something for us. And we really don't have to, because we can do this right now. We can do it in the back of an envelope. We just need to do a few things. Next. Well, can you go back, Jim? So the tsunami wave itself came across the ocean. These are the crest of the tsunami wave every 3 hours. Here we are. It struck our coast in 10 hours. The last time I was in Japan, I flew to Narita in 10 hours from SeaTac. It's that simple. If you got in a jet plane at Narita and flew across to Seattle, you might just beat the tsunami, but you probably arrive at the same time. It's that fast. It's just such a long wave that it travels so fast. Next. Now I found this is a very interesting slide. This is the height of the tsunami. The red is more than 3 meters, and the orange is up to 2 meters. Now I've been thinking that this debris had been mainly coming from the northern coast of Japan, but I'll show you a buoy from Shikoku Island. So we can get debris from nearly the whole coast of Japan. So we're not dealing with just 400 miles. We're dealing with probably on the order of maybe 1,000 miles of shoreline. That's almost like from Cape Flattery to Los Angeles. It's just mind-boggling. So you throw San Francisco in there, and you throw, a few other towns in there, and you shred them, and this is what's coming at us, and we really don't know. And I'll show you some of the things I would have not guessed. Next. Here is a U.S. Navy photograph of the debris at the time of the tsunami right off the coast. Now you see 2 boats, 2 houses, And you see styrofoam buoys, you see a big black buoy, and a lot of basketball-sized buoy. And if you look really closely, this red can is probably a kerosene container. So there's an axiom. Is it the next slide, Jim? There's an axiom in, oops, I guess not. Well, kids love, I was up in Hydaburg, Prince of Wales Island, and the kids love these oyster buoys. And I went to 10 different schools talking about the oceanography of these buoys and about the tsunami, and they had all kinds of really cool ideas of what to do with them. So it seems like the kids are more adept at figuring out what to do than we are. They really have good ideas. If they were put in charge of the Senate subcommittee, we'd probably have something done. Next. Now, what I really want to talk about is the first arrivals, and that was October of last year. I'll show you the timeline, but the latest arrivals are in 1 month in March and April. 7 things arrived. And so those people who say the debris is not arriving, just look at that 1 month. And this is a slow month in Flotsam. March, April is starting to get into the time when things don't wash up too much. But here are these 7 things. And I'm here to tell you these 7 things are really unusual. Next. Well, the main event is in October of this year. That's based on a lot of computer runs from Jim and a lot of historical data. Next. There's an axiom that, oops, can you go back one? There's an axiom. Flotsam that begins together, lands together. Sort of like Las Vegas, only Flotsam is its own little thing. So flotsam that starts together, hangs together. So if you see something that might be tsunami debris, look around because there's probably something else there that's from the same spot. Next. Now this is by son Dave Ingraham. Oh, I see, it doesn't play, the animation doesn't play on this computer. Anyway, this goes around in 3 years, the red gyre, and the green gyre goes around in 6 years. And these are the great garbage patch right here and here, 2 of them. 3 times the size of Texas. I don't know how big that is. And the tsunami coast is right here, and it's going right down the gyre highway and comes right over here. It's not rocket science. It's just the way the ocean works. Works in great orbits, great circles. And right now, the flotsam just keeps moving right along here. And it's going to be where the hockey gloves landed, from here all the way down to here. Next. So the 3 arrivals, just to repeat, are the latest arrivals, the first arrivals, and the future arrivals. Well, let's talk about the latest first. Next. Here are 7 arrivals in a month, March, April, mid-March to mid-April. A soccer ball, a squid boat, a basketball, a fish attraction device, a motorcycle, a kid's ball, and a fishing boat flag. I'll show you these. I would not have, people say, what should we expect? Well, I wouldn't have. How many of you would have guessed the 7? I might have gotten maybe 1 or 2. But this is pretty cool. This is just the beginning. Very, very, very beginning. Next. Here is the beachcombers out at Middleton Island in the Gulf of Alaska. They found a soccer ball with this writing on it, and it enabled the finders to actually track down the young man who lost his whole house, as I understand it, in the tsunami. And he's just overjoyed to get this soccer ball back. Next slide. Well, here's how the press talked about it. Bad projection, but this is very northern Japan up to Middleton Island. And what Jim shows next, that's the press. This is what Jim shows. This is the actual OSCURS drift. Pretty amazing. But notice that the soccer ball started up here in northern Japan. Now, I'd like to tell you that it's the Japanese media that are fostering the return of objects like this. And we have, is it Jody, could you stand up? This is really important. Jody is from Kyoto News, and Yasu is also from Kyoto News. They've come up from Los Angeles to cover this event, all three events. Now, the reason this is important, and I'll get to it later, is that the 5-point plan I have is the last point is to return objects like soccer balls to, like the young boy. The Japanese, correct me if I'm wrong, but Japanese media are very interested in reuniting objects like this with people in Japan. Like this young man lost his whole house, and this is all he's going to have. So it's an extremely moving story, and a story like this makes big news in Japan. So you really need to get to know Jody, because you may find something like these objects, and she'd be the one that may get you a ticket over there. That's just happened. I'm not sure how the motorcycle. Yes. You can multiply Jody by 5 or 10 more people that I've dealt with, and some of the higher ups in the media organization are very interested in sending Americans over with their objects. So Jody has been really instrumental in figuring out whose it was. Now that is hard to do, but I'm convinced it's going to happen hundreds, maybe thousands of times in the next several years. And there is a big chance that Japanese tourism could be a significant factor in Clallam County. The young man who gets the soccer ball back is probably going to want to come over here and see the people and understand what's happening. That's going to happen a lot, I think. Next. You might recall this boat, the Rio Onmaru. It didn't have a name back then. It's a squid boat. It's 150 foot long. I happened to be up in the Prince of Wales Island 100 miles away from this at the time. And I called Jim. I said, could you run the drift of the, he called it the rusty boat. We didn't know at the time. And the next slide is what Jim got. He didn't have the data. The U.S. Navy data ran only up through, I think, February 29th. And here's where it was found. And I happened to be right over here. And so it was big news up in southeast Alaska. Next. And here's what the Coast Guard did. See, these are bullet holes. And here's fire. And so apparently the Coast Guard fired on it and sank it. Now the question is, yes ma'am, the question is for the sanctuary, if a boat like this comes in close to shore, is that what we want to do? Next, one more slide, and I'll answer the question. Next slide, Jim. For derelict vessels, the question is, what happens to the invasive species on the hull, in the ballast water, and what happens to the residual fuel oil? There were 2,500 gallons on board, as I understand it. My point is that in Europe, this is not tolerated. And we really don't know when that ship goes down. I know of a number of other ships. Once they go to the bottom, they leak oil. There was one off the Luckenbach off of San Francisco for years and years and years, leaked oil. Finally, and every year it would kill a fair number of seabirds. Finally, they had to go down and dive on it and suck the oil out. My only point is we need to really understand this, but I don't think if we have a boat like that that comes ashore right off the sanctuary, I don't think we want to be sinking it out there. It's my own view, my own personal view. The Coast Guard have a lot of good people. I have a lot of friends. It's just, I just don't agree with this particular way of doing things. So when you see a boat and it's off the coast, you better think about it And the question I have is, why did it all of a sudden just show up on the coast? What are all these people with satellites, expensive satellites? Why didn't they see it halfway across the Pacific and call Jim and start modeling where it's going to go? Why did it all of a sudden just show up? Oh, gee whiz, there's the boat. Well, come on, guys. I know people in the dark community that wear really so dark clothes you never even see them. They have satellites. They tell me, oh, yeah, we can see things, Curt, but we can't tell you. I said, I understand, but how are we supposed to deal with things like this? There's a silence. And I think Senator Maria Cantwell is really after the feds to tell us what they know. Because a boat like that shouldn't just show up. We should have like a 3-month warning of where it's going to be and make plans. So that's my only, now for the question. I don't know. I'm not a privileged citizen. I'm just an oceanographer. I wasn't even able to get to the Senate subcommittee. They just had the Coast Guard and the NOAA testifying, and I fed Cantwell my questions, but that was about it. Yes?
What would you propose doing with a vessel like that?
I had my solution. I was at Prince of Wales Island, and I said, there's a dry dock in Ketchikan that's waiting. I said, why don't we just tow it into Ketchikan, put it up on a dry dock, scrape the hull, burn the invasive species on the hull. They're also on the anchor chain. Do that. Pump out the oil. Let's see. Also, pump out the diesel, pump out the ballast water and look for invasive species. Put them under a microscope so we can learn from this thing. But here I am. And the Coast Guard needed gunnery practice. Next. I don't know. That's an interesting question because the Canadian Coast Guard, it was first in Canadian waters. I don't know, but we need to talk about it before you do something like that. My wife needs 2 new joints. She needs another shoulder and another knee, and we talk endlessly about what we're going to do. We talk about things. We don't have the best solutions, but we talk about it, and then we make an informed decision, and we're moving ahead. That's all I really want to do. But apparently there wasn't any of this going on. So I would like to be corrected, but I don't think that was the right answer. Anyway, next. I happened to be in Prince of Wales Island, and I gave 10 talks to Native American schools. And I went to Craig High School, and there was Aleasha Hohorst. And she had a basketball. And I took a picture. And I took it, and I brought it back, and I sent it to a translator down in Noriko Horowitz down in Portland, excellent translator. And says, oh, that came from Kisanuma Middle School. It says Kisanuma Middle School. Should be obvious to everybody. And there's Kathy Peavy took this wonderful picture of Aleasha, and now we're trying to get Aleasha a ticket to go to. The middle school knows that Aleasha has their ball, and they want it back. So now we're trying to, maybe Jody, you could figure out how to do this. It can happen. There's lots of high-level media people that I've talked to, lots, I mean maybe 10, that would like to help with these problems. And are there any other Japanese film crews here? Could they stand up if there is? I guess not. Okay. I'm here to tell you that there's a lot of help to return these things if we can actually get pictures of it. So if you find something that has writing like this, send me a picture. I'll work on it. Don't send it to the Japanese consulate. I've spent a whole day with them. They're very, very nice, but they're in shell shock with what's really going on over there, and this is a low priority. So there are those of us who really want to make sure the human interest actually really gets taken care of. Next. Here is off Washington, right off the coast, not too far, found this buoy, a crabber fisherman, and it came from Shikoku. I sent it down to Noriko, and she translated that as a buoy from Shikoku right here. I think it's a fish attraction buoy that washed up from Shikoku. Fish attraction buoys are used all along Japan to attract fish. For some reason, and I don't know why, if you put a buoy in the water, if it floats, the fish will just swim around it as if it's their home. And fishermen go out there and catch fish. It's done worldwide. All around the Hawaiian Islands you find buoys. They're usually big round ones. Next. Here's a motorcycle, Harley Davidson, found up in southeast Alaska, I think Graham Island. So what's a motorcycle? When I first got the call from the Japanese media, I said, motorcycles don't float. And I said, well, how does that work? It was in a container. It turned out that a young man had his favorite motorcycle in a storage shed in the backyard, and the shed floated and brought the motorcycle over here. Next. So here's where it started, Miyagi Prefecture. They found the registration, and it was traced over here to Graham Island, April 18th. Now, who would have guessed a motorcycle would be over here? But the license plate was on it. It was traced. They actually talked to the gentleman, and I believe that one of the media organizations over there is paying for the motorcycle to be shipped back. Now that's really cool. I actually got an email from a motorcycle engineer from Harley Davidson, and he wanted to know the VIN number on the motorcycle so he could tell me more about that particular bike. Next. Here is Jim's simulation of the Harley Davidson drift. Next. Here is, you might see on all those slides, you go back one, Jim. There was a vessel found in the middle of the Pacific right here. Now go forward. It's this vessel. It was found in September, and it was labeled the Fukushima. How it got there, we don't know. It's still a mystery, and I don't think Jim has we don't know where it came from, so even though it's the name of the reactors, we're not sure where it came from, so we haven't run the simulation. But this just gives you an idea of what kind of vessels you might look for. It's like a Boston whaler, maybe, I don't know, 20 feet long. So the kind of vessels, I'm expecting 100 vessels over the next couple of years. I think they'll vary from like 20 feet, maybe 15 feet, up to, you saw the Rusty boat, that was 150 feet. I've talked to fishermen who know the Japanese waters. They say the vessel's 300 feet coming this way. So surely the federal authorities could give us a little advance warning. Next. So I took Jim's simulation of the boat, the ball, and the motorcycle, and they all started in northern Japan, and they all washed up southeast Alaska area, Queen Charlotte's. And they all had the same wind factors, of a wind factor of about 2, which means they sailed and caught the wind pretty well. So we're dealing with early arrival stuff. So that's up in here. Next. Now, drift variability in the ocean varies incredibly a lot. You might see different kind of models run in the media. They're using average wind and they're using average currents. The ocean isn't average. Every year, the drift is so different. Every year, Jim runs a hypothetical drifter from Ocean Weather Station Papa. From World War II. It was a vessel stationed out there for military purposes all during the war. It's still maintained as an oceanographic observing area. That station is usually occupied during a year at one time or another by oceanographers. So it's a very famous place. So Jim runs a hypothetical drifter from December through March. And here's 2009. Here is 2011. And here's 2012. Incredible difference winter to winter. Again, it's December to March, but just rolling the years forward. Incredible variability. You can't take the ocean as an average thing. So what Jim does is he takes the latitude of the endpoint and he makes a graph every year from 1902 to the present to see what kind of cycle we're in, to get an idea of what we might expect. So next one. And here is Jim's drift variability 1902 to 2012. Here are the years. Here's the endpoint latitude. See all these dots? Those are the individual years. See the red line? That's a 5-year running average. Now you notice 1977 and about the year 2000. Those are climate switches. Those are when the climate really has a major shift. 1977 was a huge huge shift in the North Pacific of many, many variables. And this was the time that it was in the Northwest around here, it was warm and dry on the average. It was really nice weather. What we've had lately, last year or two, have been typical of the prior to 77, 74 back into about 1964, almost back to 1947, right after World War II. It was pretty much the weather we have now. Cold, wet, not much of a summer. What's happening right now is we're going into a 30-year period of this. So I'm not Dr. Doom. I'm just saying that's the way it is, folks. I've been doing this a long time, and I've been wondering, we've been waiting for this climate switch for a long time. This is important stuff. You see all the people that from 1947 to about 1977, that was the weather Seattle got famous for. Any of you watching The Killing on Channel 67, every scene, it's raining and it's cold and it's wet. That is the way Seattle was from 1947 to 77. One time in, I think, 67, it was 100 days straight when the sun didn't shine through the clouds. That's the kind of weather we're headed for right in here. Now, really, what's interesting is this weather is what Seattle's famous for, but this warm, dry weather is what sucked all the Californians up here to retire. So now guess what happens? The psychiatrists are having a wonderful field day because now we're going into 30 years of gloom and doom, and they're going to have this, what is it, SAD, whatever that stands for, you know, where, anyway, seasonal affective disorder is going to be huge right in here for psychiatrists. That's what we're dealing with. So that's the way it is. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Okay, next. So the first arrivals were oyster buoys, basketball buoys, kerosene and vinegar containers. Next. Now notice this is the scene of boats, buoys, and houses in Japan on the coast, washed up by the tsunami. Now notice what's in here. There's a house, there's a boat, there's actually fishing flags. Japanese fishermen love to have a colorful flag on their boat. That particular flag, I can't show it because it hasn't got released by the Canadian Coast Guard. It was one of 5 kept on a vessel, and the flag washed up, and as far as we can tell, the boat perished in the tsunami, but we haven't actually. A bank vice president said, I gave that flag to the fishing boat, but we haven't pinned the story down. So, but notice, there's big black buoys, there's a boat, and there's a house. Next. This is off the coast, along Japan. We got houses. Off the side, there's 2 boats. We got buoys, and we got a kerosene container. So I've shown you already recent arrivals. We've had boat, buoys, but where are the houses? They're out there somewhere. Were they all mashed up in the winter? So if I would be looking for street numbers on houses, I would be looking for, go home and look at your house and say, what would survive that would tell me that that was my house? The stuff is probably here on the beach because we've already had the boats, we've already had the buoys. Parts of houses must be here. But we can't, maybe Jody can recognize it because it was one of her colleagues that told me that that was a kerosene container and not a fishing boat gas can. Next. These are what the big black buoys look like. They often have Musashi written on them. They sail right on the surface of the water like an empty kayak, and they blow across the ocean in about 7 months. I've had objects like this in my files for years, but I just couldn't believe that something could blow that fast, about 25 miles per day. Not until I got hundreds and hundreds of these buoys, and the average speed was like 20 to 25 miles per day. Next. On my blog, on my website, I called them Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. These 3 have washed up. They're used for raising oysters. They've washed up from Northern California all the way up to Kodiak, the same distribution as the hockey gloves. So nothing magic about this distribution. It's just the sheer speed. They just move along at a mile an hour, which is a really fast drift rate. 25 miles a day is a very, very fast drift rate. Next. Then these started showing up in numbers: kerosene can, vinegar container, and these basketball floats. I was down at Ocean Shores at the Beachcomber Fun Fair, and I was with Fuji Television. And I was talking, I said, here are these big black buoys. And she said, what's that red can there? I said, well, it's just a gas can. She says, no, it says kerosene on it. I said, well, okay, somebody put gas in a kerosene container. No, open it. Opened it. It's kerosene. It's some of the simplest possible things. I said, what about that white one? Oh, that's for vinegar. Japanese like to cook and clean with vinegar. Well, how do you know that? She says vinegar. And so we opened it. It's vinegar. If it wasn't for Fuji Television, I wouldn't have tumbled onto this right here. Next. So here are the buoys by type, type 1, 2, and 3. Here are the black ones, the white ones, and the football shape. Notice that 70% are styrofoam. And that begs the question, what do we do with styrofoam? And the answer comes from the kids up in Prince of Wales Island. They said, well, we'll just shrink it. Now, how many have ever had a Dungeness crab pot float, you know, those bullet-shaped ones? If you take them and you put them down 100 feet, they get half the size. And they shrink up to like rock hard. So the point is, all we got to do is to take these and shrink them, put them in a compress, because they don't re-expand. That's what the kids wanted to do. They said, we'll make docks out of them. I think there may be a market for these as construction materials. Arnold knows of a place that might be able to crush them down. So I told the kids, I said, everybody that goes fishing, take one out, lower it down 100 feet, and tell me what size they shrink to. This is a big deal in Alaska. Alaska ships their waste down here to eastern Washington, and as I understand it, we ship ours down to Oregon. And I guess California probably ships theirs to China. I don't know. Anyway, the reason that Alaska can't get rid of their styrofoam is they have to ship out their debris in cargo containers. And there's so many of these that have washed up that they can't afford, they fill up so many containers, they can't afford to ship out the styrofoam buoys, so they're stuck with them. And this is only the very early stages of this debris arrival. So what are we going to do? Don't know. That's a question. I still like the idea of compressing them. Next. Here is the buoys by month. I've been so inundated with tsunami debris that I stopped in February. This is a count based on about 400 buoys. October, bills, January 12, February, and I think March is about the same number. Then things have tailed off in April and May. It's a pretty typical pattern for beachcombing. Lots of stuff comes ashore in the wintertime. There's nothing unusual here. It's just nobody believed Jim and I when we said they started arriving in October. You should have heard the laughs in the federal wherever they are. They just totally dismissed it. Next. This is Jim's simulation of where these buoys went. I just blew it up. This is one of the earlier October 9th. I wanted to know where they were concentrating. And Alaska was getting 2%, Vancouver Island 85%, Washington 11%, Oregon 2%, and California 4%. This gives you an idea of how the debris could be focused. The shift may be a different part of the coast, but I expect there to be focusing. Expect there to be concentration. And I hope that Jim can with his model and the network of beachcombers, we can figure out where the concentration is going to be. If it's on the outer coast of Vancouver Island like it is here, the Canadian government says we have no way of getting the debris from the outer coast, which is the same dilemma we face here on parts of the outer coast here. We have no way of actually getting it. I know there's some people kayaking and so forth, and that's a big start. And I hope, well, Vancouver Island, I love the outer coast, so if they get this enormous amount, I don't know what they're going to do. And most of it's going to be styrofoam. I'll show you in a minute. Next. So what's happening is the coastal currents along the coast reverse winter to summer. In the wintertime, the currents go north all the way up into Alaska, the so-called Davidson Current. Starts down here about Santa Barbara, all the way up into about Sitka. And in the summer, they come south from about Sitka all the way down past Baja, all the way down to Acapulco. So what's happened is that debris I showed you was coming ashore here in Gulf of Alaska. Now we're switching into the summertime, and that debris is coming down our way. So the change from summer to winter is bringing a lot of that debris back our way. So I'd be watching for it. Next. Future arrivals. In my view, we're at a 6-month countdown to October. Whatever we do, October is it, in my book. Next. Here's the simulation again, not working tonight. I think the winter winds pushed a lot of the debris up into southeast Alaska, and the summer winds are going to bring it back down. It's just about just what happened to the Nike shoes. Happened to the hockey gloves. Nothing mysterious. It's just the sheer quantity is mind-boggling. Next. Here is mid-windage debris. Estimated time for arrival, April. These are examples like small refrigerators. Remember, Arnold, we found a small refrigerator out on the beach. They're out in here. We've seen a little bit of it up in here, but it's still hanging off, and this is March 31st. We're now a month or two later, so wind factor 2 is like the motorcycle, the basketball, the soccer ball. That stuff is already along here, so we're already down to objects that are smaller. They don't stick out of the water very much. They're here. The lower they ride in the water, the longer they take. So what's next? Next. Well, here is Arnold and two colleagues, I think it was, went out south of Cape Flattery, and they found this styrofoam buoy. This is last October, I think, wasn't it, Arnold? November? But they found all these Dungeness crab pot floats. They found these high seas drift net floats. They found all these footwear. I think it was 60% lefts and 40% rights, which is a good prediction of the election. And a small refrigerator. This turned out to be one of the early, very early tsunami debris. And there's also a lot of deep science about footwear and lefts and rights, but we'll go into that some other day. Next. Here's John Anderson with one-day haul at Forks. He found 10 glass balls, I think it was late last year, and look at all the styrofoam. Apologize for the poor quality. And this is just one man out with two quad machines and two buoys bringing back. This is peanuts compared to what's coming. Next. But not all tsunami news is bad. Here's the glass ball. I don't know did I explain last time what the Japanese did with all their glass balls? They threw them away. In the 1950s and 60s, plastic came along. So instead of using glass balls to suspend their fishing nets, they shifted over to plastic. So what did they do with all those glass balls? And we're talking about a production of 100 million glass balls. We're talking about they probably threw away 20, 30, 40 million glass balls. Well, what do you think? What do you usually do with something? They tossed it right around the marinas, up in the brush. They didn't toss them very far. They just put them up above the high tide line and left them there, and the brush grew over them so you didn't see them. So what does a tsunami do? It comes in and it lifts all those wonderful glass balls up, and they're coming our way. So they are low windage drifters. They don't stick above the water much. When you start seeing a lot of glass balls, that could be a real clue that the main mass is here. So there's good news and there's bad news. You're going to get a lot of styrofoam, but you may get a lot of glass balls. And these may be really old glass balls, so the first people that are going to find them are probably looking at glass balls from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And if you've gone on eBay, some of those glass balls, like an 18-inch rolling pin float, sells for about $2 or $3 grand. So I've been telling people, when it comes October, get out there and look for glass balls. Next. So here is Jim ran the glass balls, and they're kind of like out in the middle here. Just a little sample. And they're due, I think, in October. So some pretty cool things going on. It's not all bad news. You could your 401k could take a significant bump up. Yes, sir. That's OSCURS. That's the model. That's all we really know. If you were from the CIA, I'd want to know how you know that. Because I'd know you'd have access to black satellites that could actually see them. So there are people who know this stuff. Next.
We've been talking about, and very interesting, so all the treasures that we haven't found that we expect to find.
Right.
But when I think about the debris field, actually the debris field, which is 3 times the size of Texas, and it hasn't arrived yet,
Right.
the impact of that, the ecology, the impact on marine life,
Okay, the question is about the debris field. What's it like? How big is it? What are we going to do when it's here? The lady talks about 3 times the size of Texas. That's a vast underestimate. It's, well, there are experts and there are people who know. And Jim is here, and he runs, this is the middle of the low windage debris field. The rear end is about here, and the leading end is up here. You're talking about an area that's several times the size of California. California is about, I don't know, just for the sake of argument, 1,000 miles long. There's 2 Californians that are coming toward us back to back. They're going to be stacking up like a big freight train. That's what's going on. So it's not just the leading edge. It's just going to keep arriving for the next several years. It's not just October. It's going to be happening for years. Now the question is, what are we going to do? What are the ecological implications? this is an unprecedented scientific opportunity for which the oceanographic community has not even begun to think about, let alone go out and observe it. And one of the things I'd like to know is, what are the ecological implications? I already have friends, colleagues in Vancouver Island who are getting more than the normal number of dead sea turtles. The sea turtle migration route is right along that gyre highway, right along where the debris is. You probably don't know it, but the turtles lay their eggs in Japan in the just about Tokyo area where there's the tsunami came in, lower but still significant. And the turtles that survive go right swim as little ones right across to here, and then they turn south and they go down to Baja California where they grow up into, you know, big mother turtles, like 400 pounds, and then they swim all the way back to Japan and lay their eggs. So if we're getting more than the normal number of dead sea turtles, what's the interaction with the tsunami debris? We don't know. It's just one question. What I usually say to the press is, we don't even know the right questions to ask. And we aren't even getting after the ones we do ask. So why is there this mindset against actually dealing with this? I don't know the answer. I'm just a private citizen. I don't take any funding or any advertising. I'm a politically incorrect person, and I just say what's on my mind. And that's the way it is. Next. The fastest time for my data files for objects to cross the ocean, Pacific Ocean from Japan to North America is 7 months for fishing buoys. That put the arrival right on schedule at October. There was no surprise when I looked at my data files. Fishing vessels have been washing up here since 1806. There's 55 documented vessels, clearly documented from Japan to North America up through about 1876. The fastest was 11 months, which put I estimated the first arrival at February. The rusty boat was a month late. No big surprise. The data clearly show it. Glass balls, the fastest that I know of is 20 months, which puts the ETA at November of 12. This is just what the data shows. Next. Arrival summary, you've seen this. First arrivals October 11, latest arrivals March, April, and the future arrivals, the main event, is in October 12. That's the beginning, just the beginning. Don't be seduced by, oh, well, that's all there is. After October, we're home free. No, that's just the beginning of like a 5-mile freight train piling up in the freight yard. It's just going to keep coming and coming and coming. We got to be ready. Next. This is a preview of what we're going to be talking about in the next two talks. We're going to be talking about identifying tsunami debris, and you need to know what is not tsunami and what is tsunami. And I want to talk about 12 really nasty things you should really stay away from. Next. Planning workshop is, we'll look at the fundamentals, how the ocean pushes debris all the way into Dungeness Spit. We'll look at how the tidal flow is comprised of tidal eddies, which concentrate flotsam at the shoreline. The inner strait of Juan de Fuca, based on 40,000 drifting objects that I've studied and released, 74% of the objects will concentrate on 10% of the shoreline. If you know where the 10% is, you know where to go. You don't need to waste your time on beaches where you're not going to get much. And Dungeness Spit happens to be the place where nearly all of it in the inner strait goes. Next. Can you go back one, Jim? We'll talk about specifics, removing the debris from the shore, storing the debris, sorting the debris, recycling it, and returning it to Japan. And that's where connection with the Japanese media is just vital. Next. And, well, Jody's already stood up, so I thought there would be some other people here, but I hope they see the video and they'll step up. We're already working with a number on things that can't be talked about so far. Next. A key fundamental on shoreline concentration, 74% of the debris will wash ashore along just 10% of the shoreline. Now the Coast Guard out at Edith's knows this, and if one of you happens to be lost, they know where your body is most likely to wind up. And they send out their choppers to those spots because they have the best chance of finding you or your vessel that way. They're really good, really good. But we don't know this for the coast. And we don't know it very well from the coast west of Freshwater Bay. Next. This is just a specific dilemma. What do we do with all the styrofoam? This is one beach, one small section of a beach up in the Queen Charlotte Islands. Look at all the styrofoam. If that were your beach, what would you do? And what if this kept coming ashore every month or every week? What would you do? I don't know the answer, but if it's in your front yard, you're probably going to get it off the beach, and then you want to take it somewhere. So we can figure these things out. Probably neighbors will help. But if the whole shoreline's like this, we got a problem. But if we're organized about it, we can handle it. Next. Debris categories we'll be talking about are hazardous materials, derelict vessels, personal effects, human remains, fishery debris, and glass fishing floats. There's 105 slides, and we'll go through how to identify all this stuff. And you'll see what's not tsunami debris, and then you'll see what is tsunami debris, and get a clear idea of what to do with it. I'm all about local, local, local. We need to get the local community involved and organized, and that's why I'm here. We just need to do this and not wait for some grand federal plan, which probably isn't going to happen. We need to do local organizing. Next. Plan for the debris, 6-month countdown, and each local community needs a local plan. Like, all right, is it Gelson's Supermarket where you take it? Is it the local landfill, or is it the local, is it Clallam County Construction Yard? Or we need to have probably in the order of 20 places for beachcombers to take debris so we can sort it and recycle it. Next. I write a newsletter, and I try to put the latest, so the next one's due out in July. Things change daily, so it's a hard newsletter to write. Next. If we are organized, the debris will not pose a problem. And that's it. Was that enough? I'll answer any questions you have if I can. Yes, ma'am.
So you have 3 other events.
Yes.
And
Can we go back to that first slide, Jim? Kind of hard. It shows the schedule of the events. There's also a copy of the newsletter out there for everybody, as I understand, Laura.
There she is. There's Laura.
So,
good. Just
The twine.
oh, something going on.
no, sorry, excuse me.
Do you want me to talk about the workshops and where they are? Is that what?
Yeah, that'd be good, yeah.
Yeah, just when it's done, when the questions are done, and if you want to help.
No, I think there's 3 more. There's 1 in Squim, and there's 2 more here. Here we go. Maybe you could walk people through.
Yeah. So the ID workshops, like Curt was saying, are really there to help. Help with sort of what people are going to do as they come across this debris when they're on the beach. You're going to be the first people interacting with that debris, and we need to, have some sort of system into place in terms of how to identify that debris and what to do with it. The planning workshop. So there's 2 of those debris ID workshops. One of them's in Squim tomorrow morning at the Transit Center, starting at 9 a.m. It'll go till about workshop is on Wednesday, so that'll be similar to the swim workshop. And after the ID workshop from 9 to noon in Port Angeles on Wednesday, there will be, starting at 1:30, a planning session. We're really hoping to have some local, state, and federal folks, as well as the community at the table, to talk about what we're going to do with this debris once it starts coming onto our planning for that. Hopefully that will answer. Curt might be able to elaborate as well.
What my goal is just to get really local plans. Can the Coast Guard, fisheries, and forestry all work together to give us maybe 20 locations where beachcombers and interested people can take their debris and drop it off for sorting and recycling? That's one thing. When I was up in Alaska, I was very encouraged. The Forestry Service says, we got rock pits all over the place, because rock pits up there is where they take their rocks to build things, and they leave these nice areas next to the highway that are flat and cover about a half acre. And I said, well, those are perfect. And I was talking to the forestry guy who happened to be there. He says, we can make this happen. We just need to do that. So there's some things we can do. The SurfRiders and the Coast Guard provided a remarkable model. Arnold was on the beach with 2 other beachcombers, and they picked up 50 bags of flotsam, I think in a day or two. And then the helicopters from the Coast Guard lifted it off the beach and brought it, I'm not sure exactly where. And then Arnold and company went out and got it at Nia Bay, I think it was, and brought it into Port Angeles, where there was 8 of us, 8 students and myself and Jim and Arnold. 8 of us, or 10 of us, sorted 1 ton of trash in 2 hours. We put it into recycling. We identified what was tsunami debris, identified what wasn't, and it only took us 2 hours. So I'm thinking that there's a lot of students out there that we could train to do this. It's not rocket science. It's cans and glass. A lot of it's just ordinary recycling that I do all the time. In my house, I'm the recycler. So I ran out of gas. Yes, ma'am. We'll talk about, the question is, are we expecting debris to be pulled in through the Strait of Juan de Fuca? And the answer is yes, it's already happened. There's already debris at Dungeness Spit. Into the Puget Sound, yes, there'll be some. My files are full of quite a few records of objects that get all the way down as far as Fox Island. I wouldn't say it's a lot of debris, but we're dealing with such an immense quantity we don't know. But one of the workshops I'll show where all the concentration locations are. I'll show you about oceanic intrusions and how they bring debris all the way in. It's a process that's been known since 1875. So we'll go into Dungeness Spit, Edith's Hook, all the places where debris collects. So the answer is yes, it's already happening. When you have an awful lot of debris off the coast, I would expect a fair amount to be pushed all the way up through the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Yes, sir.
Do you have any estimate of what percentage of the debris that started from Japan will actually be in the large enough chunks that can be actually recovered once it hits our shores? Because some of it's going to break down to very small pieces.
Yeah, it's already broken down. These big buoys that I showed you. Early in the winter, they were pretty defined, well defined as big cylindrical styrofoam buoys. Later in the winter, a lot of them had broken down into chunks 6 inches across. And people were emailing me and saying, well, what is this? And I said, well, I don't know anymore, because they started breaking down. And then other beachcombers later in the winter said, I got a whole bunch of these styrofoam beads all over my beach. Well, if you look up close to those buoys, they're really large cell styrofoam. It's not like a coffee cup, that's small cell stuff. But these are, half-inch size cells, and these are really crudely made, and they break down into this stuff. And that's what happens in one winter. So there's a rule of thumb that for every object that I learn about, that I could trace. There's 100 more that are out there in the homes of beachcombers that are never reported. So we have 7 that I happen to know about through various means. Multiply by 100, there's probably 700 objects that could be traced. That's just the way beachcombing is. I know that because I've tracked messages in bottles in scientific studies for many years. And the rule of thumb is if you put 100 objects off Japan, you're going to learn about one of them over here. Actually learn about it. That doesn't mean that's all there are. It's just some get broken up, some get stranded, some beachcombers never reported. You'd be surprised how many beachcombers I talk to say, "You ever find a message in a bottle?" "Yeah, where is it?" "It's on my mantle." "You ever open it?" "No." Very, very, very typical. I opened one. It took a team of 7 of us, including a man from the CIA, a year to figure out it was from China's famous dissident Wei Jingsheng. It took us a long time to break through the Taiwanese bureaucracy and all this stuff. And that was just one message in a bottle. It's really, really hard to trace a lot of this stuff. And right now there's an awful lot of people that want to help. Yeah, Liam?
Yeah, you were saying some of the early finds, something as much as 85% of the stuff went up to BC and north. Is that those kind of numbers play out with the hockey gloves and the Nikes where the majority of it went north?
Well, the majority went, Liam's talking about the hockey gloves, where they went. They first came in shore at Vancouver Island. And I think they first arrived, what was the year? What month did they arrive, Jim? Was it January? No, that's the spill was in January. The spring, but the winds pushed them north, and then the summer winds brought them back south. What I think's happened for the tsunami debris is it came in, a lot of it to Vancouver Island. Winter winds pushed all the way up into southeast and some of it to Kodiak. Once the debris gets past Sitka, it's going to keep on going around that gyre. The stuff that gets to Sitka and kind of stops when the winter winds shift to summer, that's going to start coming south. So a lot of the debris is already going around the red gyre. But that leaves an enormous amount that's going to come back this way. And we really don't know the numbers. But you saw the hockey glove map. I think overall, if we could know 10 years from now, that would be the average distribution, except we just don't know the size. One container can hold 15,000 hockey gloves. So how many containers of tsunami debris you think we're dealing with? 1,000?
One more question.
1,000. I would guess probably 1 million containers of debris. Yeah.
Probably one more question.
Okay,
and then
cool.
wrap it up this evening.
Oh, good. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the possibility of human remains. What are you expecting?
I'm expecting 100 sneakers with bones in them. Not right. We'll be talking about that. You might have recalled the BC situation. There was only 8 of those. It took the Royal Canadian Mounted Police probably several $1 million to trace the DNA. But the good news in this case is that the Japanese must have a very large DNA database because there are still 3,000 people missing. So when they find a finger or a hand in some of the debris they're still collecting, they must have a very large database to compare it with. So when we find a bone in a shoe, we could send it over there, and I would guess that they'll be able to run it through the DNA database a lot more easily than the Canadians, because the Canadians were dealing with a situation. They had only a database for criminals. There's 2,400 people missing in British Columbia, but most of those aren't criminals. So trying to track the DNA for somebody who's not a criminal is a daunting task. So if you find walk by a sneaker, don't stop in your tracks. Take a stick, turn it over, and see if there's remains in it. If there are, call 911 and wait for the police. because what may happen if you turn your back on it, the tide may come in a little bit and take it away. And that may be the only remains that a Japanese family is ever going to have of their people that were lost. I have worked with cases where there was only the thing found was a jawbone found in a fox den. Huge find for the person. Happened to be the jawbone from the cook on the fishing vessel Galaxy, and that's all the wife ever had. So we're dealing with things that are of extreme sensitivity. Emotional content is just enormous. So be respectful and think of it, if that was were your mom's bones in that shoe, what would you do? And that's the way I think about it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you.
So thank you so much for speaking tonight, and we're really looking forward to the workshop series. We hope that all of you guys will be able to make it. If you have any other questions, you can visit the website. It's tsunamidebrisymposium.wordpress.com for the schedule and locations and maps and directions and all of that. Or, the schedule's up on the board as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks.
I think it goes right here.
I need to run and track down Eric really quick.
Yeah.
I'll be back. Thank you.
Oh, I'll be here. Hi, Dave. I can't seem to get it stays on orange.
Okay, well, we'll get Eric to take care of it.
Yeah.
There's probably a switch on here that turns it off.
He was saying that this was that
right
one.
there.
Yeah, that was it.
There we go.
Oh, you got
Now
it.
we
Good.
don't have to transmit. Good job.
Oh, thanks for setting things up.
Yeah.
Hi.
A couple follow-up questions, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. Hello.
I'm not going to be able to make the identification workshops tomorrow because of school and work,
There's two of them.
but they're both during school.
Oh.
So I'm specifically wondering about the Dirty Dozen. Is that information available on your website or?
It's going to be in the YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Well, but you didn't actually talk about what
No,
they
that's
were.
because it's going to be covered in the identification.
She wants to know what they are real quick.
I mean, or is it available in the newsletter on the website already? Because we can't make it to
No,
the identification.
it takes me about 15 minutes to go through
Yeah.
it.
We are going to be filming one of the workshops, and
And
we'll
then you'll
get
post
that
that?
put up on YouTube.